There's no manual for what to do when 50 strangers pitch tents on your pasture and tell you you're the trespasser. No warning, no permission, just a bright pink visor, a clipboard, and a whole army of HOA warriors planting flags on your private land like it's the new frontier. Would you walk away, call the cops? Or would you stand your ground and fight for the soil your family bled for? This isn't just a story about property lines. It's about what happens when people forget that respect isn't something you laminate on a badge. It's something you earn, acre by acre, generation. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly how far one rancher had to go to teach an entire neighborhood where the real boundaries were drawn. A ranch, a legacy. Why some land can't be taken by vote. You know, most folks these days think you can just vote yourself into anything. Vote for a block party, vote for a bake sale. Heck, some of them think you can vote yourself onto private land like it's a potluck dinner. But some things ain't up for a vote. I was raised on this land. 5th generation. Before Amazon Prime, before cell towers popped up like weeds. Back when deals were made with a handshake and your word was worth more than a notarized contract. This ranch, it wasn't just a property line scribbled on a county map. It was late nights mending fences under a busted flashlight. It was muddy boots lined up by the door. It was my granddad teaching me how to spot a storm coming, just by the way the horses shifted. It was hours. So when I rolled over that hill and saw neon tents and barbecue smoke floating over my south pasture, when I saw strangers' kids pulling my cattle's tails and a woman in a pink sun visor waving a clipboard like she was Columbus discovering America, something old and stubborn in me snapped awake. Because you can vote on a lot of things, but you can't vote yourself a piece of a man's soul. And make no mistake, that's what land like this is. It's soul you can walk on. And hey, if you're the kind of person who still believes in the old school idea that respect needs to be earned, not demanded with a clipboard, smash that like button, drop your wildest HOA story down below, and subscribe for more real-life throwdowns like this one. Because trust me, this battle was just getting warmed up. That day, I made myself a quiet promise. I was going to protect this ranch the way my granddad would have. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with patience, paperwork, and maybe just a little creative irrigation. Karen's fantasy kingdom. When HOA rules cross property line. You ever seen a person so drunk on imaginary power that they just make up their own country? That was Karen. Pink sun visor, mirrored sunglasses bigger than her actual face, striding across my pasture like she was planting flags for the glory of the HOA empire. Beaming. She marched up to me, clipboard clutched in one hand, a stack of wrinkled printouts in the other, and declared with all the grace of a malfunctioning megaphone, "This land has been voted common property under emergency recreational expansion bylaws." I blinked. Once. Real slow, like maybe if I stared hard enough reality would start making sense again. Because here's the thing, her bylaws, they stopped at her own white picket fence, about 3 miles back. But that didn't stop Karen from drawing her own map, one that conveniently annexed my ranch like it was a new food court wing at the HOA mall. She even had a map, hand-drawn, in Sharpie, with my pasture circled like it was the prize on a game show. Congratulations, you've won 200 acres of someone else's blood, sweat, and mortgage. And behind her, a small but mighty parade of clipboard holders, lawn chair warriors, and inflatable pool enthusiasts, nodding like bobbleheads at every word she said. It would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Because it wasn't just about land. It was about respect. It was about people thinking that paperwork and peer pressure gave them the right to trample over someone else's history like it was crabgrass. Karen thought her pink visor parade could just steamroll its way into my life. But what she didn't realize, when you pick a fight on a ranch, you're fighting someone who's been battling weather, stubborn cattle, and broken tractors since before you figured out how to work a clipboard. And That was a fight I was born to win. But little did I know, Karen wasn't just bringing tents and rule books. Nope. Next up, she was about to call in the cavalry and try to have me arrested on my own land. Siren smirks in stupidity the day the sheriff chose the landowner. You know that sound? The one that makes your stomach flip even when you haven't done anything wrong? Sirens wailing through the trees. Crew's reward going louder. Oh, sir. Real fast. And there I was, sitting on my ATV, boots in the dust, watching Queen Karen march up and down my own pasture, pedal to the music. The wind was generating that 1920s dramatic version of the Wild West standoff. Yes, officer. He's aggressive. He's trespassing. He's threatening our peaceful community event. Right. Because apparently sitting on your own land quietly makes you the next great American villain. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I didn't even roll my eyes. At least not where Karen could see it. I knew better. You don't wrestle pigs. You both get dirty, but only the pig enjoys it. And deep down, I had a pretty good idea how this was going to play out. Because you see, when you live in a small town long enough, you know the sheriff. You know the deputies. You've swapped Christmas cards, shared barbecue recipes, maybe even patched a fence together after a tornado blew half your cows into your neighbor's cornfield. Karen didn't know that. 2 sheriff SUVs kicked up clouds of dust as they pulled onto the ranch road. Doors swung open. 2 deputies stepped out, one young and twitchy, the other older, slower, with a mustache you could lose a squirrel in. Karen sprinted toward them like a woman possessed. Officers, that man is threatening us. He refuses to leave HOA property on my ranch. I nearly snorted. The older deputy, Deputy Cole, gave her one long, slow, squinting look, like he was mentally calculating how many brain cells it would take to understand how wrong she was. Then he turned and smiled wide at me. "Well, I'll be," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Good to see you, bud. How's the cattle doing?" Karen's face collapsed like a Jenga tower at a 3-year-old's birthday party. You know him?" she sputtered, clutching her laminated HOA rules like a drowning woman clutches driftwood. Deputy Cole just chuckled. "Known him longer than you've had a mailbox out here, ma'am." And that was when Karen realized she didn't just pick a fight with the landowner. She picked a fight with the land. Of course, she still tried. Out came the papers. The Sharpie maps. The HOA Emergency Expansion Doctrine she had printed from some dusty corner of the internet. Deputy Cole barely glanced at them before handing them back like they smelled bad. "Ma'am, HOA rules don't override private property deeds. You're trespassing. Pack it up, or we start writing tickets." Karen's mouth opened and closed like she was catching flies. Her supporters, if you could still call them that, were already starting to deflate, folding chairs and pulling up tent stakes without waiting for the official word. The Queen's army was retreating, and she knew it. You ever seen someone realize they lost but they still can't quite believe it yet? That look is better than any 4th of July fireworks, and way less likely to involve burnt hot dogs, because the next move she made wasn't just petty, it was downright dangerous. Coming up, how Karen tried to legally lock me off my own land and accidentally handed me the keys to taking her down once and for all. The Great Wet Retreat, when sprinklers beat squatters. You ever hear the saying, "Don't get mad, get strategic"? Yeah. By the time Karen and her soggy army tried their second invasion, I was way past mad. I was ready to get creative. See, after Deputy Cole and the boys sent Karen packing the first time, she didn't take the hint. She regrouped. She schemed. And 3 days later, she came marching back onto my land, clipboards, coolers, tents, and all, like Napoleon after a bad Yelp review. This time, they brought bigger speakers, bigger grills, and about 100 more excuses. They even printed new banners that read Community Freedom Weekend, as if slapping a patriotic name on it somehow made trespassing legal. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Now, I could have called the sheriff again. I could have filed more paperwork. But where's the fun in that? Instead, I turned to the one ally Karen hadn't counted on. Sprinklers. Hidden across my south pasture, buried deep in the grass, were a dozen heavy-duty irrigation heads, each one capable of spraying 100 feet in any direction. Quiet, precise, manually activated, powerful enough to soak a man clean out of his flip-flops. I waited. I watched. Karen strutted around, directing people like some HOA field marshal. Kids were setting up inflatable pools. The smell of cheap hot dogs filled the air. And just when Karen raised her clipboard to officially open her unauthorized festival, I hit the button. The first sprinkler head erupted near the grill station. A jet of freezing well water blasted the burger table into the next county. The second sprinkler hit the face-painting booth, sending kids shrieking in all directions like paint-covered gremlins. The third sprinkler caught Karen herself, right in the back, sending her flying forward, clipboard overhead, like a linebacker faking a touchdown dive. You ever see a grown woman in a bedazzled sun visor try to dodge a sprinkler? It's better than any pay-per-view fight you'll ever see. Campers were slipping in the mud, dragging soaked tents, cussing up a storm. The bouncy castle? Deflated like Karen's legal arguments, limp, sad, and covered in soap bubbles. I stayed right where I was, sitting in my truck at the edge of the field, sipping my coffee and filming every glorious second. But honestly, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about embarrassment. It was about reminding people, gently, hilariously, and legally, that respect matters. The land deserves better. Neighbors deserve better. We deserve better than bullies hiding behind clipboards. And while Karen and her soaking wet kingdom beat a sloppy retreat back to their SUV, I knew she wasn't done yet. Because Karen, she was about to trade sprinklers for lawyers. And she had no idea the storm she was walking straight into. Coming up, how Karen's bogus restraining order almost backfired into the biggest legal own goal this county has ever seen. Paper wars and courtroom battles, fighting bureaucracy with truth. If you've ever been blindsided by paperwork you didn't know existed, welcome to my Tuesday. Because after Karen's great wet retreat, she came back swinging, not with logic, not with apologies, but with paperwork, stacks and stacks of it. Permits, memos, mysterious community annexation maps that looked like they were drawn by a raccoon with a Sharpie. And the cherry on top? A hastily filed restraining order against me, the man whose land she'd been squatting on like it was her personal backyard resort. You gotta admire the hustle. There's a special kind of delusion to trespass on somebody's ranch, get soaked by legal sprinklers, and then try to call yourself the victim. But I wasn't worried. Not really. Because you see, I had something Karen didn't. The truth. And a very angry lawyer who charged by the hour but fought like she was being paid in revenge. We spent the next 48 hours building a counterattack the way a farmer builds a barn. Strong, precise, and designed to withstand storms. We gathered land deeds going back decades. Survey maps, signed, stamped, notarized. Witness statements from neighboring ranchers who saw the whole circus unfold. Security footage showing Karen organizing her illegal jamboree like it was a suburban Woodstock. We even printed screenshots from Karen's own HOA newsletter where she bragged about bringing the community closer to nature. Meaning, apparently, closer to my hay barn. By the time our packet was ready, it looked like something you drop on a defendant's desk in a courtroom drama right before they realize they're cooked. It wasn't out for blood. I didn't want Karen to lose her house or her family or even her beloved clipboard. I just wanted one simple thing. Respect. The kind of respect that says, "This is my land, you stay on yours." Court day arrived like the opening scene of a Western. Karen strutted into the courthouse wearing a bright pink business suit and a frown that could crack concrete. She dragged behind her a rolling suitcase stuffed full of evidence. most of which, from what I could tell, consisted of handwritten notes, fake maps, and one laminated HOA badge she wore like a sheriff's star. I showed up in a clean button-down shirt, blue jeans, and my best boots. The same way you show up for harvest season or a handshake deal that means something. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who looked like she'd personally wrestled a few stubborn bulls in her time, took one look at Karen's presentation and sighed so loudly even the stenographer smiled. Karen's lawyer, poor guy, tried to argue that HOA bylaws extended rights to adjacent natural spaces. My lawyer stood up, flipped open a folder, and said calmly, "Your Honor, the nearest HOA property ends 3 miles from this land. Attached are the legal surveys, purchase history, and sworn affidavits verifying ownership going back 60 years. The judge leaned back, looked at Karen, and said the sweetest words I'd heard all year. "Ma'am, your HOA has no jurisdiction beyond your own subdivision fences. This is trespass, pure and simple." Boom. Like watching a dam crack wide open, you could see Karen's confidence crumble right there in front of the whole courtroom. In the end, the judge not only dissolved the restraining order on the spot, she fined Karen for filing a frivolous claim. And as icing on the cake, the court ordered the HOA to pay maintenance fees to me for using the access roads that crossed a tiny sliver of my ranch. That's right. Every month from now on, Karen's HOA was going to cut me a check for the privilege of driving on my dirt. Sometimes life serves justice with a sledgehammer. And sometimes it hands you a check and a front row seat to your enemy writing it. But don't worry, Karen wasn't done embarrassing herself just yet. Because coming up next, the story of how a glittery HOA queen sash became the most accidentally hilarious symbol of karma our town has ever seen. When the land speaks louder than lawyers, the final courtroom showdown. There's something funny about courtrooms. They're supposed to be solemn, serious places where justice gets handed down like scripture. But that morning, sitting there in my clean boots, watching Karen march in, dressed like she was going to a HOA-themed fashion show, I realized the day wasn't just going to be justice. It was going to be comedy. Karen strutted in, dragging behind her what looked like half the Office Depot clearance section. Binders, maps, laminated posters. She wore her glittery HOA queen sash again, like that was going to impress the judge. Bless her heart. Her lawyer, poor guy again, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Meanwhile, my lawyer just sat there, cool as a glass of sweet tea, flipping through our evidence binder like she was waiting for her number at the deli. The judge entered, gave us all a long stare, and the moment the session opened, Karen's lawyer jumped up like his chair was on fire. "Your Honor, we would like to argue that the HOA's collective will overrides individual property claims when community interest is at stake." Even the court reporter raised an eyebrow at that one. My lawyer stood up slowly, placed a hand on the stack of land surveys, and said, "Your Honor, we have 60 years of ownership history, county records, video evidence of trespassing, and documented damages. Community interest doesn't erase private property rights in the United States, last I checked." The judge nodded, the kind of slow, deliberate nod that made you know which way the wind was blowing. But Karen's side wasn't ready to give up. "No, sir." They rolled out a giant poster board showing a map where somehow, magically, the HOA lines expanded to include my ranch. They even color-coded it. It looked like a kindergarten project gone wrong. There were arrows, dotted lines. At one point, I'm pretty sure they just wrote hours in red marker across my fields. The judge peered over her glasses at it, sighed so deeply you could practically hear her soul leaving her body, and said, 17. This is not evidence. This is wishful thinking." Then she leaned in, voice flat but full of iron. "You do not get to vote yourself ownership of someone else's land. Not with bylaws. Not with banners. Not even with glittery sashes." Pardon's face, Lord have mercy. It crumpled like a paper plate in a rainstorm. It wasn't just that she was losing. It was that, for the first time, she realized the land doesn't care about your titles. It doesn't bend to ego. It remembers who tends it and who tries to take it. The final verdict? Karen's restraining order? Gone. HOA's claims of expanded community property? Laughed out of court. Trespassing charges? And health. Damages? Had award. "Excuse me for my delay," said Harry. "Monthly maintenance fees? Permanent." And the kicker? The judge fined Karen personally for abusing the court's time and filing false claims, and ordered her to perform community service at the county livestock barn. Yeah, Miss HOA Queen would be mucking stalls and scooping manure under a sign that read, "Respect private property." As I walked out of that courtroom, the sun warming my shoulders, I realized it wasn't just about a legal win. It was about a deeper kind of victory. The quiet kind? The kind where the land and the truth stand taller than any clipboard or badge or map scribbled in red ink. But if you think Karen just packed up her sass and vanished quietly, oh no. Coming up next, how a glitter sash, a scarecrow, and a very stubborn ranch dog gave this story the ending it truly deserved. Building fences, building trust, how a ranch healed a community. You'd think after a courtroom showdown like that, things would just end. Like the final page of a storybook. Karen banished, justice served, fade to black. But real life doesn't work like storybooks. Especially not in a town where everyone knows your name, your dog's name, and how many fence posts you've replaced this year. After the dust settled, there was still the matter of putting the pieces back together. Not just fixing fences or regrading tire-rutted fields, though Lord knows there was plenty of that. No, I'm talking about rebuilding something a lot harder than wood or wire. Trust. See, when Karen tried to bulldoze her way across my land with her laminated fantasies, it shook more than just my sense of peace. It shook the whole community. Neighbors who'd once waved at each other across driveways were now wondering, could someone like that turn on me next? The line between personal property and community had blurred, and it needed to be redrawn, clear as a barbed wire fence under a big open sky. So, I decided to build a literal fence, and an invisible one too, not to shut people out, but to remind everyone where respect begins. First, the real fence. Heavy cedar posts, thick gauge wire, hand-driven one by one with the same stubborn patience that won the court battle. A couple of neighbors even showed up to help, unasked. Old man Jenkins from 3 farms over brought his ancient post driver, a rusty monster of a tool that probably weighed more than he did. A couple of teenagers from town, who I figured had better things to do, showed up anyway, hats backwards, sleeves rolled up, just because, in their words, it ain't right what she did. We sweated. We hammered. We cursed the rocks, hidden just below the soil, and somewhere between hauling fence rails and telling bad jokes, something amazing happened. The cracks Karen had tried to carve into the community, and they started healing. People talked more, laughed more, shared more. We weren't just fixing a boundary. We were stitching the neighborhood back together. Funny how it works sometimes. A bad storm comes through and tears up everything you thought was solid, but in cleaning up the mess you find a new kind of strength. One anchored in shared sweat, shared coffee thermoses, in shared stubbornness to do right by each other. And the invisible fence? That came from conversation, sitting on tailgates after long days, passing around beers and stories. We talked about respect, about rights, about how being a neighbor doesn't mean owning each other's spaces. It means honoring them. Little by little we built something bigger than a wall. We built understanding. The ranch was whole again, and the town was just a little bit stronger than before. But if you think that was the happy ending, well, you haven't heard about the county fair yet. Because, coming up next, one glitter-stashed scarecrow, one unforgettable punchline. And the final chapter, Karen never saw coming, beyond property lines, what it really means to own a piece of America. When the last fence post was hammered in, when the dust finally settled over the fields, I stood at the edge of the south pasture, boots planted in the dirt, and I realized this fight was never just about land, but it was about something bigger. It was about belonging, about the soul of a place, a patch of earth tied to memories, to sweat, to every stubborn dream my grandfather once whispered into the wind. Owning a piece of America, it's not about deeds or surveys. It's not about laminated maps or HOA pamphlets. It's about stewardship. It's about walking your land at sunrise and knowing every rock and tree like old friends. It's about fixing broken fences, not because anyone's watching, but because it's the right thing to do. It's about saying, this is mine to care for, not to conquer. Karen, for all her bluster, never understood that. She thought ownership meant power, that it gave her the right to bend the land and people to her will. But here's the truth. Real ownership isn't about control. It's about responsibility. It's about love. You know, the day after the fair, I went back to that scarecrow. The one dressed up like Karen, clipboard and all. Someone had tucked a note into its pocket. It said, "Respect the land, respect your neighbors, and maybe leave the glitter at home." Simple, honest, exactly right. So maybe the real victory wasn't winning a lawsuit or installing a fancy new gate, or even watching Karen drive off into the sunset in a U-Haul packed with shattered dreams. Maybe the real victory was quieter. It was a community remembering who they were. It was a ranch standing a little taller under the big sky. It was a man, stubborn, tired, but proud, realizing that sometimes the best battles you fight are the ones you fight with patience, principle, and a whole lot of faith. If you ever find yourself standing at the edge of something you love, something he knew was worth protecting, remember, you don't need a clipboard. You don't need a megaphone. You just need a backbone and a good pair of boots. Thanks for writing this story with me. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment sharing your own battle for the land stories, and subscribe for more real tales of heart, grit, and maybe a little ranch side mischief. Until next time, hold on, honor the land, and never, ever let someone redraw your story with a Sharpie.